Hi, welcome back. This week we have Giorgio. Giorgio is an ex-colleague of mine from EF, Education First. He's a polyglot and a linguist, and he works in multiple languages every day, switching between all the different languages. So he has a pretty cool job for him and for his skill set. And he comes from a humanities background. He talks very much about the interplay between different skills and transference of knowledge between different types of skills within different work environments. I think it was a really interesting conversation, and he's obviously got a lot of academic weight behind him with a PhD and knowledge of how all that worked, and then applying that into fast-moving consumer business. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I'll see you at the other end. Hi, you're listening to Wimbledon, hosted by me, Nick Ray. Giorgio, why don't I throw it over to you straight away to introduce yourself, give us a little bit about yourself, where you are and how you got to where you are in life right now.
Thank you, Nick. It's a pleasure for me to be here. So, I'm Italian originally. I'm from southern Sicily. I grew up in a very small town, in a very beautiful ancient town in southern Sicily, and I was always fascinated by languages and other cultures. Well, Sicily, first of all, is also, it's kind of it's been historically a melting pot of different cultures, but also it's a land of mass immigration and emigration. So a lot of people have left in the past 70 years to go abroad: UK, Germany, Belgium, the US. And, they used to come every back every summer for a short vacation, and I was always taken aback by this variety of languages and this weird stuff that people brought with them. Because it was in the 90s and there was no internet. I mean, there was internet, but not in my hometown.
And certainly not a form that people would recognize, young
Exactly.
people would recognize today,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yes. I mean, although that kind of sound of the old 50s and 56 modem, K modem, makes me nostalgic, but that is another completely different topic. My path towards languages, cultures, communication started really because of that. I know it might sound so. This exposure to different cultures from people who were actually part also of my culture. After that, after I went to university in northern Italy, and I did first classics, so really kind of old school. And then I continued in, with theoretical and applied linguistics, which is what I specialized in. And after my PhD, I worked in different places. Right now, as I said, I work for EF and I work as Director of Academic Management. So I'm responsible for the academic operations of our language campuses in Europe. So mostly non-English, so French, German, Spanish, and Italian. Costa Rica, Spanish, obviously, and South Africa. So I have a little bit of I mean, the work I do is very much what I've always loved in my life, which is dealing with different cultures and dealing with different languages, or even different varieties of the same language. And I work in the local language. So, although I'm a linguist, being a linguist doesn't mean you know a lot of languages or you speak them. But in my case, not to brag about that, the two things come together because I'm pretty much a polyglot. I love languages. My mother tongues are Sicilian, which is an Italian dialect. It's called dialect just because, um, you know, it's not an official language, but it's historically very different. So if I speak Sicilian in Milan, no one would understand me. They wouldn't understand words. So I speak Italian, Sicilian, Spanish, French, German, Swiss German, which you might remember is very different from standard German,
Yeah.
and English, and I would say pretty proficient level. And then I kind of fake Portuguese, and I was trying to learn Russian, but then COVID hit. So I enjoyed this quest for, I always enjoyed this quest for clarity, and the this quest for clarity in chaos, which is what happens a lot when you deal with languages. Languages are um, when you do research about languages, you will encounter, potentially languages are non-finite. You can produce, invent words, make up sentences which don't make any sense, but are absolutely possible. Um, and so it requires a lot of studying languages, how languages work and their structures and how they change is at the crossroad of everything we that defines us as humans, because languages are a big, are the vehicle for communication,
Mm.
the main vehicle, and are also, languages are also a big part of your identity. As you said, the example you gave, you mentioned before, you recognize yourself as being from that particular place because of your language. And within a community, you recognize yourself as part of a smaller community or a sub community, call it the way you want, because of language. So I came into languages like that. And, on the one hand, there is this kind of big. I had this passion for all those things, for the things I just mentioned briefly. But also, linguistics is a kind of weird discipline because you deal a lot with data, which requires a lot of statistical analysis. It's not the, you know like literature, which is something I love, but it requires dealing with a lot of other different issues, and with disciplines which you might think are not exactly close to linguistics, like biology, or when you do historical linguistics, or genetics, because you want to figure out where some people came from. And sometimes the answer is in the language rather than in the genetics.
Specifically with your expertise as well, learning languages and linguistics and things, I mean, that's a very obvious goal that a lot of people set themselves. And in fact, I can imagine that there's a lot of people listening to this because they're trying to learn a language and they probably want to know, like, what's an expert in linguistics, how do I do it, like, what's the easy fix. And so I think, what's your kind of thoughts around that, like, how about achieving goals, your philosophy towards that?
Well, so when it comes to winning, and so let's say the normal dichotomy, success, failure. Well, my philosophy is a little bit, I would say, a little bit Protestant in a way, that I think there is a reward for hard work, and for the ability to persevere in any, let's say, in any journey you embark on. You need that in order to succeed. You need discipline, you need routine, you need a goal. Let's say, rather than a goal, I would call it something like a vision, so more of a dream.
Mm-hmm.
But then
Yeah.
I think the goal needs to be realistic in a way. So there needs to be a balance between those two things, because otherwise you risk setting yourself up for failure. And I'm really into, and I think it comes also from my background in which is very much in the humanities, is that there is a lot of one of the main points, or the main things for winning something or for getting to something you want to achieve is failure, the success of failure. And probably I should be a little bit more specific about that. But I think we often, when we are constantly told, you can do it, babe, you can do it, and, we're overly positive, we tend to forget that there are a lot of possibilities in errors, so, in mistakes, in failures, in what happens, because we tend to we don't tend to analyze things as being connected sometimes. So we kind of forget that, oh wow, okay, I didn't get this dream job, I didn't finish this project, but there is something that is also occupying my mind or something, and of course I failed. And then, but we don't necessarily reflect a lot on the failures. I think we should kind of normalize when we talk about winning, when we talk about uh, our dreams and our goals and what we want to achieve and the way we need to achieve, because of course, it's not just what we want to achieve, it's how. I think we should normalize a little bit more the concept of um, or the inevitability, I would say, of mistakes, of failure. So, the struggles, or we should embed the struggles that will come with that project, or
Yeah.
within our strategy to win.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's come up a lot, and I totally agree with you. Like failure and however you frame it. I mean, anything that is worth doing should be, by definition, hard to do. Right? Like it should be challenging. It should take some. If it's super easy to do, then it's going to be something you do all the time. And it's therefore not considering an achievement really, or something you've strived towards. So anything worth that is going to require it to be hard in some form. And if it's hard, then there's a high possibility of not achieving it at some level, right? The two go hand in hand, and so learning how to get there means failing. And I always reflect on those. You must have seen them, the YouTube videos with the people who are like throwing pens into cups, 30 meters away, and like, they're doing all sorts of incredible things, like throwing cards across a room and it's like slicing into something, or dropping a ping pong down a load of pans to land in a pot at the bottom or something of a staircase. Those kind of videos, I'm like, everybody knows when they're watching it, they're like, oh, that must have taken a while. But it's like, to actually sit and think about how long did that take to do, and at the amount of effort and perseverance a person must have gone through to sit down and just do it again and again and again until it happened. And also how many times they've done it where it didn't ever happen and they just said, oh, this sucks, I'm not going to do it. And that is it. It is an easy to frame because it's a very tangible goal they're setting out. But those sorts of things, when you apply it to the bigger effort of learning a language, for example, I mean,
In general,
yeah.
or driving, a business, or dealing with people, doing a personal project. I think, we uh, one problem I see when we talk about success and failure is that we don't reflect. I mean, we tend to reflect on our mistakes, on our failures, as some sort of inability.
Yeah, I think also, just to jump in, when something fails, that doesn't make you a failure. I think that's the important distinction, because people take a loss and they're like, I'm a failure, I'm a loser, and that's not the case. It's that failed, not you, that that situation failed, and maybe your application of whatever it was you were trying to do to achieve that goal, that is what turned out to not work out, and that was the fail. But it doesn't define you as a failure, and I think that's where, I mean, I've been doing a sort of live stream thing called Mental Fitness Mondays, and we've talked a lot about well, mental fitness, obviously, as the title might suggest. One of the things that kept coming up again and again was this kind of like, get to know yourself, get comfortable with yourself, and really trust in yourself. And I think that's one of the things we often find ourselves guilty of, is we let things that go wrong define us sometimes, and we let them we let it be that it's our fault when it's actually something that wasn't necessarily in our control, or we can learn from that. I think embrace the fail has also come up. Embrace the fail. Learn to embrace when
It
things
is
go wrong
it
and
is
learn
a
from
big
it.
part of anything related to learning, learning curve in a way.
Yeah.
So let's say, to use an example that probably someone wants to hear, like a couple of tricks about learning a language. Let's say,
Me, please, because I'm
but
learning Norwegian and I
yes,
cannot
so
wait to
you're
learn more.
learning Norwegian right now, but you might learn whatever other language, and the first thing you try to do, even unconsciously, is communicate. You want to
Mm.
communicate, so you will start saying things. You will start using words, to make structures that are actually the structures of your mother tongue, rather than the target language you're learning, and it might result in very funny situations sometimes, because I mean, people might misunderstand you. um, but the thing is, there will be failures in that process, and we don't do the self-reflection bit in the way that is not like, okay, uh, I mean, everybody should also admit I'm not good at it. That is fine. But it's also giving yourself the time to learn from, those errors, those mistakes. If you get the time to self-reflect and you can transfer that, and it's actually my favorite topic, which is transfer of skills.
Nice.
Cleaning up your house once you have all this mess in your head, which might work in very different ways for very different people. It might be like, I cannot, there are a lot of people who use apps with flashcards to learn words, and I need to write. I'm very old fashioned. I
Mm.
write by hand, also because there are some cognitive benefits to that. And I spend, um, you know, and again, this relates a lot with my idea of winning. I'm not saying I meditate, but I let consciously my mind wander off, and I tend to consciously, probably because I'm Sicilian, uh, I want to have times where I'm bored.
Mm.
Because in those times, my mind starts spinning.
Mm-hmm.
Just get weird thoughts, and it's not that I'm a genius, and every time I think it's like, exactly, it's not like that. Sometimes nothing comes out of it. But sometimes you have those two thoughts, like, how am I gonna solve this conflict within a team? Or, okay, there is COVID, and what do? We just switch online. Yes, but how can we cannot just take everything and make it happen online as if it was still the real
Yeah, normal. Yeah.
the new normal. It's like, you have to adapt, you have to understand what people think, how their brain reacts to overexposure to
Mm-hmm.
videos, and um, etc., etc. And if you give yourself, I think, if you have a plan, you have a goal, but you kind of let your mind off that goal, and available to think freely,
Mm.
That will, I think, helps a lot. And as I said before, it helps a lot in terms of, you know, executing something that might not come up in a traditional, more focused setting.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something you learn quite a lot when you do research and when you do humanities. So these are skills that you can transfer. You know, we always talk about transferable skills, but
Mm-hmm.
what are those transferable skills? What can you transfer? Can you transfer knowledge? Yes. Can you transfer knowledge from, like, the knowledge you get, while learning a language to a setting where, you have to make a business decision? Can you do
Mm.
that? I think so.
So tell me a bit more about that then. This transfer of knowledge. I mean, have you got some theories on it? Have you been researching it? It's like I know that you're extremely passionate about it, and what's
There is a lot of research about the transfer of knowledge, so especially in education, but also in business, because more and more what business leaders and business schools are finding is that when you work in a company or lead a company, you work with people, you work with
mm,
humans, and with all the inevitable uh, issues and challenges that come attached to with this. And in general, I think when you talk about transfer of skills is or knowledge, is taking knowledge that might not look like related to what you're doing and transfer it to a context where you will use those skills, like, and make it work in a context which bears no resemblance to what you originally did. Let's say,
So I
I'm
think I think I'm a bit. I'm going to clarify because I'm a bit confused now on skills versus knowledge, and the fact that when we talk about transfer of knowledge, like I'm thinking in business context, for example, transferring it, the way you've described it, how to do a particular set of tasks within a business, for example. If somebody, when I think about it, someone knows how to run a machine, for example, or whatever in a factory. So there's something like that. Let's keep it simple. Obviously, transferring that knowledge to someone else is where the way I'm thinking about transfer of knowledge, and then what you're saying is how you can then apply the way in which those skills are developed to something else. Is that right? Or yeah.
when we talk about skills and knowledge, so knowledge is what you know. So let's say you know how to speak English, you know how to code, you know how to close a budget, or to balance balance sheets. So this is knowledge. But then when I refer to transferable knowledge, is taking in a way an unorthodox approach to
Mm.
in a context which is not necessarily related to this kind of background. Let's say you did engineering, I mean, or I did linguistics, and then you're used to designing experiments, planning, and or models that define a problem. You test solutions, or different solutions, and then you implement a plan. And
Mm.
you might think that oh, okay, this is a skill that everybody should have. But most likely, very often in the process of looking or testing different solutions, someone with a different background, or someone who's not whose let's say
Unconventional.
viewpoint whose viewpoint is not the same, might come up with a different solution, which is actually much faster, much more efficient,
Yeah.
much better. That happens a lot. And
It's funny. It's funny. I was just thinking of something when you said that. Have you seen the $1 billion Code on Netflix? It's very much in line with that because they talk about the guys who designed Google Earth, and then were suing Google for stealing Google Earth, basically. So it was the guys who came up with the initial planning. It was the German guys. And one of the things was there was one artist on board. It was like all about the art. Like the art was given as much weight as the engineering and the coding of the engineering. So it's like very much in line with what you're saying. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, exactly. And I mean, but this happens a lot. And, you might call it, it relates again to what we were discussing before, which is winning and setting yourself up for success is sometimes working or seeing things from a different angle.
One of the amazing things about EF is that it has managed to grow and flourish in a fairly chaotic structure. Oh, when I say fairly chaotic, that's unfair.
It's an organized
organized chaos.
well, not even chaos. I think, there is a lot of room for personal initiatives.
Yeah, but that's what I was going to say was that so what I think they've done is they've hired lots of people who are very good at dealing with what's in front of them and coming up with innovative solutions to what's in front of them. And the reason that's so important is, and the reason it is kind of chaos is probably a fair word, is more to do with what you're dealing with, which is thousands and thousands of students who are all individuals with individual differences and goals, trying to achieve something which is complicated. Language, language acquisition is the main goal of most students with EF, and that is in itself complicated, because then you've got teaching, you've got all the massive amounts of variables of teaching, classroom sizes, location, like all these different things going on, and motivation of students on an individual basis and what they've got going on in their lives. All of those variables mean that it's extremely, if it's not chaotic, it's extremely complicated. So complicated that it would be almost impossible to sort of code for or build an algorithm for that would make sense in terms of, making it a simple structure. And so I think that's why EF has been very successful, is because it's hired a lot of people who are very capable to do that. And then someone like yourself, I have no doubt you are capable of that, sort of dealing with the unstructured in front of you, but also the fact that you come in with a very structured academic outlook. You've had the training and the you've worked within a very structured framework of this is reading research papers, doing this research and teaching in an academic format. And I think that's probably why I assume you're thriving. I hope you're thriving within that work environment. So I can see why it works. I can see why it works.
When you do business, there is something, or when you're an entrepreneur, whether for yourself, a business leader, I think it's absolutely important to keep all these aspects, these skills and this knowledge into account when dealing with situations which might look like they have nothing to do.
I think when the human aspect comes into anything, which it usually does in any business nowadays, I mean, it's very rare to have a business which is not linked in some way to an end consumer or in some format towards humans. And when the human element comes in, it automatically complicates it, because that we are emotional beings that we can't help ourselves, and so we are easily manipulated, and we're easily influenced, and we have a lot of preconceived ideas. We have culture, we have language, we have society that defines a lot of the way in which we behave, and those behaviors vary. so not having the ability to take all of those contexts in, and more importantly, on the positive side, being able to take those things in, I guess, is what you're saying, what I'm hearing at least, is, that breadth of knowledge. I mean, I always believed so strongly in people traveling. That's part of, everyone I know who's traveled a lot and got to explore and particularly live in other places and sort of feel how they are, learn how they are. I use a word or an expression, cultural dexterity. The idea that you know go beyond this cultural sensitivity, but you actually learn about yourself and how you can apply yourself within a different cultural framework and remain you. You know, that's a real challenge because especially when you're learning a language, you know, like now when I'm speaking Norwegian, I'm really different. I see it. You know, I'm a very extrovert person normally, but then when I speak Norwegian, I go completely silent, basically, because I'm concentrating so hard on the person talking to me and trying to translate what they're saying. And, you know, I'm not being normal me. And I think when you get to a level where you're just comfortable being yourself and you can flow in that way, that's something which is really special. And so I see those life skills as extremely valuable and an asset which would be an asset to lots and lots of different formats, like you're saying.
Exactly. So I think, I mean, you can go, but it's not because I studied humanities, but I think what those disciplines teach you is basically how to look at things in very different ways, imagine things which might sound crazy nowadays, now, and might be possible in 20 years. I mean, it's not Elon Musk who invented or thought of space travel. I mean, it's been a constant in literature, since the second millennium before Christ. And people had all sorts of ideas, and some of them actually happened because technology made them possible. But the idea didn't come from technology. I mean, it's the idea comes from people, and it's for people. When you lead a company, and we talk nowadays, there is a lot of talk about leading with passion, compassion, etc., etc. But I think you need to have also an idea of the human aspects as and it's pretty funny. I was reading an article a few months ago on the Harvard Business Review. I have to dig it up, and I will send it to you. About, and it's a very much a business outlet, and they were also advocating for more humanities, and they were actually giving a lot of examples of people who of a lot of CEOs who had studied liberal arts in the American context. And, uh, uh, you know, and this is the value for me, the added value of humanities. When I say humanities, it's not just literature, it's learning a language, it's at a crossroad. But communication is such an important skill. And when you learn another language, your first language, I know it sounds weird, there is a lot of research about that, actually improves because you start developing an awareness of your own language. You start doing, after you go over your silent period, which is what you're having now, so basically trying to figure out what people are saying and not being able to really produce, then you start making, just you start like, okay, so this is like this in Norwegian and this is like this in English. Okay, so but this is different in English. This is like this in Norwegian. You will start making, uh, you know, cleaning up your database, to use
Yeah,
this
yeah,
metaphor. So you will start understanding that I think in Norwegian is öl, beer, is
yeah,
the same word as ale in English because it actually comes from Norse in English. It's
yeah.
so you will start understanding that some English words actually resemble Norwegian because both are Germanic languages, but their pronunciation is absolutely different. Also because we're talking about centuries of difference. But then you will clearly, you will put things, you will create your own database in the fastest computer we have in the world, which is our brain.
Yeah. Nice. Oh, Giorgio, listen, I think that's that's a really nice wrap up way to sort of almost close on. But I wanted to give, before we close, I'm conscious of time as well and your time, but I wanted to give you a chance to just kind of round up with any advice you have for people out there, anything you wanted to put out in the world. I mean, obviously, mine is not a huge platform, and I don't want anyone to think that I think it is a huge platform. This is a really nice, it's basically a treat for me to be able to talk to interesting people. And then if anyone follows that and wants to join in the conversations, then that's cool. No, but it's true. And I always said the reason for doing it, you know, if I manage to interview one person who has a positive influence on one person, then I've won. So, and I know that that's already happened. So I super appreciate having you here, Giorgio. I think it's very interesting for people, and I think they're going to have had a really interesting time. But I wanted to let you have a chance just to sort of throw anything out there in the world. If you had any advice for young people, maybe some advice for young aspiring linguists and people who are looking to sort of follow a path like you did. Please don't say don't do it.
No, I'm not gonna say that. I mean, of course, I think, we always talk about, I mean, my piece of advice for, for young people, and also for people who are looking for a change, which doesn't mean changing jobs, or you just probably want to start a new project, like a podcast, or so I think it's getting dreaming but staying real. So dream big, but make sure you know what you're capable of, and you set up also for appreciation of failure.
Mm.
I think this is because I believe in serendipity a lot. I think I love the things, the best ideas that come out of us, of ourselves, are actually ideas we didn't really look for. I think this would be my piece of advice. It's like exploring a novel place, learning a new language. You know you're gonna fail, but you also know that at a certain point you will make it. And it might be in a very different or unexpected moment than you thought. And it's like usually that moment when you think like you want to give up, and then just like, wow, I understand what they're saying. And you don't expect it. You're totally like, and then you're in awe, and you're just like, wow, this is amazing. Let's give ourselves time to do that.
Brilliant. So, Giorgio, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's been wonderful to speak to you. And yeah, anyone out there listening, I'm sure Giorgio won't mind you connecting on LinkedIn. And if you've got questions for him, I'll put his name down below. I'm going to mash it up now. It's Giorgio Iemmolo.
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 It's one of the most difficult last names in Italian, I know.
Iemmolo. Yeah, with a small I.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Please feel free to rate and subscribe on all the different things. So subscribe on YouTube and rate this on Apple Podcasts or wherever you pick this podcast up. I super appreciate it if you do that. So far I have none. So you could be the first. All right. Thanks so much. Bye.